All right, what is up, guys? This is Ivan from getivan.com, and I'd like to welcome you to my Inkscape overview. So in this tutorial, we're going to keep things simple, and we're just going to go over the general layout of the Inkscape interface. I don't know everything that Inkscape is capable of. I haven't used every single facet of this tool. So when we come to areas that I'm not familiar with, we're just going to skip it. And maybe in the future in an advanced section or a section on specifics, if that ever comes, then you might be able to get some insight into that feature that I skipped. So keeping things simple, let's start here at the top. Obviously, you've got File, Edit, View, Layer, Object, Path, Text, Filters, Extensions, and Help. In File, you can create a new template, which is this whole area that you see here. You can open a file. You can save a file, you can import an object or something or other. Export to PNG image there, as you can see, but there's also an export area. And you can modify the document properties. You can quit and close this. You can quit Inkscape altogether. You can close this particular instance, etc., etc. Edit is fairly similar. You can do cutting and pasting, find and replace. You can just come into this section and get a feel for what it's capable of. There's a preferences section here. View, same story. It's pretty self-explanatory. You just got to come in here and see what it's capable of doing for you. Layers is a little more relevant. In this section, we can actually start to manipulate certain things that might be relevant to a project. So you definitely want to not forget about this, because this will allow you to raise and lower the levels that you have certain selected objects at within your project. And I'll explain that in the future in future videos. Object here allows you, this is also a relevant area for certain common things. It allows you to do grouping and ungrouping in particular, and rotation, as well as flipping objects. You can also access the align and distribute section here, which is a relevant side area that's used very frequently for any project. Path is a little bit more advanced. I'm not really going to get into doing pathing for a little while in my videos. That might be in a more advanced Inkscape video in the future. Might have a guest come on and explain that section perhaps in the future, or I might just spend the time to do that. So I wouldn't worry too much about this. If you understand how to work these kinds of things from the get-go, then you'll already know how to deal with it. Text, shouldn't be anything in here that you need to mess with, but you're welcome to take a look in there. There's a filters tab. And this is more, again, an advanced feature. You can come in here and play around with it and do some interesting things, but most of the things that you're capable of doing in the more advanced sections, it requires a lot of advanced understanding to be able to make something look professional. Otherwise, it just kind of looks comic-y. So same thing with the extensions section. And then there's the help section here, which shouldn't be relevant unless you might be able to come here and there, I thought there was an update feature, but I guess there's not. Okay, so pretty self-explanatory up there. Obviously some relevant things in File and Edit, a little bit in View, definitely in Layer, a couple in Object, and the rest of these you don't really have to be so concerned about. Then at the top here, this top bar actually changes based on the particular tool that you're using on the left bar here. So on the left bar, we've got our basic cursor. If ever something is going wrong, you can always come back, click back onto the basic cursor, and that'll allow you to maneuver in this environment. There's also the node tool here. If you have an object, sometimes you can click this node section and you can manipulate certain facets of the object. It just depends. That's more of an advanced feature. There are certain things that you can do with basic shapes using the node tool, that can be useful, but this is mostly for, excuse me, taking an object and editing it to its path, and basically creating nodes with an object like an image. You can force it to programmatically create nodes around to sort of automatically detect objects within an image, and you can do various things with that. It's a pretty advanced feature, though. It's not something I've messed with in a long time, and in my experience, it's mostly a waste of time, so I wouldn't really worry about it too much. This here is a sculpting tool, and you can basically, it's exactly what it says, tweak objects by sculpting or painting. So you can have an object and you can use sort of a paintbrush to sort of paint through an object or push certain things around an object. Basically, it's an advanced feature. I wouldn't worry too much about it. Zoom in or out obviously allows you to zoom in or out by right clicking or left clicking. So that's a useful feature, but you can use hotkeys to do that as well. So we'll get to that in a bit. Measurement tool, as you can see here, it allows you to measure things to a certain degree. I'm honestly not too familiar with it. I don't really have a necessity to measure things, so you're welcome to play around with that, see if that's useful to you from a technical standpoint. Maybe from design standpoint, you want to make things very precisely parallel to one another, something like that. There's certain tricks that I use to do that without using tools like this, but maybe with complex projects, this could be useful. Then you've got your basic shape tools, your rectangle, your three-dimensional objects, your ellipses and circles, your stars, polygons, spirals, etc. These are much more useful, especially your rectangles and circles. And in some cases, some of these polygons can be really useful. So I definitely recommend playing around with circles and squares. It's very useful stuff. I'll be talking about that in future videos. You've got your freehand lines, your Bezier curves and straight lines, paintbrush. These are basically your more artistic features. I don't use those very frequently. There might be an occasion at times to use something like this, which allows you to create a perfect straight line and even create unique variations on those lines. But it's not really necessary. Most of what I do involves basic shapes and text. And that brings me, of course, to the text feature, which is exceedingly useful. And all you have to do is click here, and you can drop text somewhere. And then once you're finished writing that text, you can come in and you can resize it to your liking. And we'll get into that in a bit as well. Then we've got a spray paint tool, pretty self-explanatory. You select that and you are able to spray a certain color. Again, that's a very, it's more of an artistic feature, so you'd have to be familiar with how to do that kind of digital painting or digital art for it to look professional. You've got an eraser tool, which is mainly used in conjunction with spray painting or paintbrush or pencil type features. It's not something I use because I mostly use text and shapes. You've got a fill tool, which is sometimes used but not very commonly. When you use this, allows you to fill a certain space within an object with a color. Create and edit gradients. So this is not something I've used, but it looks like it lets you create a color gradient, which could be useful, but I see that as potentially difficult to make that professional in appearance. Create and edit meshes, pick colors from images. This is very useful, and not that you're using not in images necessarily, but sometimes when you're dealing with multiple colors, even just two neutral and a solid basic color, it's useful to use this tool really quickly to switch between colors. So this, all you have to do with this teardrop tool is select it, select the color you want to use, and it'll put it onto your palette, and then you can go back to whatever other thing you want to use. And then you've got diagram connectors. I'm not familiar with this, but it's pretty self-explanatory. It looks like you can create diagrams based on shapes or text, and then you can just connect them, using this feature. So pretty straightforward on the left sidebar there. Then down below we have your color palette, and then here you've got a quick layer selection. You have the ability to lock layers or to make layers visible or invisible. And then on the right side here, we've got a quick edit section, including some of the taskbar stuff and some various other features like snap to grid and whatever else is here. This is actually useful. I don't know. I know that Inkscape comes without these things prevalent in the shortcut section, so I can't really come from ground zero to tell you how to get those there, but I'm pretty sure you just have to come up here, and if you want the layers section, you probably have to click layers here, and it drops it down here. Yeah, so here's the layers section. I just clicked it and it opened it up here. And if you want to minimize it, you can click this arrow and it'll minimize it. Actually, oh, and it looks like it went up here to this sidebar. You see this sidebar here, layers, text and font. So it's a quick way of keeping things organized so it doesn't look too cluttered. But I use all of these sections. I use fill and stroke. I use the align and distribute, which you can find up here in object. So align and distribute there. Export PNG to export PNG. So that should be here. And let's see here. Layers is up in layers. Text and font should be right here. Clicking on text and font. And so it's helpful to have all of those open, and then as you need them, and where's fill and stroke? Let's see here. It's probably right here somewhere. Here it is, object, fill and stroke. Not everything is going to bring it up in the shortcut menu. Sometimes it'll bring up a mini area, a mini little menu, like when you go to File, Document Properties, it brings it up in a small window here. And so you're gonna want to be able to open this, for example. So and I'll get into some project examples in a bit. But point is, you can open some of these areas, and your Inkscape instances, generic instances, will load with those out there, and these are very useful. I use these all the time in projects. And it might seem a little complicated at first, like there's a lot of information, but really, when you get down to it, it's just a few windows open, and as you deal with objects and text, you're just coming over here and changing colors and changing the layers, and it's actually pretty simple. So that's pretty much concludes the overview for dealing with this interface. You're basically just coming in here and you're switching between many tools that allow you to manage circles and squares and the pointer and text, and picking colors from certain areas. And then you're coming over here and you're changing color settings, you're changing the layers that things are on, you're aligning objects to the page or maybe to a specific object using this tool. You're changing certain features about the font, certain font details, like whether the font is centered, or you can even change the font class here instead of through the font tool here in this top bar. And then you're exporting the image, so a variety of simple functions encapsulated within 5 or so menus, basically. And the last thing I would have to share is some hotkeys. So Control, Shift, Alt are pretty common, mostly Control or Control and Shift. And if you're on a Mac, it would probably be the Control key or maybe the Apple key. I'm not too familiar with Mac. I'm on Windows. So, and also, you can, if you have a mouse wheel, you can click down on your mouse wheel, which is called mouse 3, and that allows you to move the canvas. I think you can also do that. Sometimes you see down here when I hit Alt, Shift, or Control, it actually changes how the program is detecting, the way that the program is detecting how you're trying to manipulate something. So there might be another way to control the viewable. It might be Control Shift. Let's see here. Oh, there it is. So Control and then right click as well will move the canvas. That's very useful. It can be very irritating when you can't figure that out. You can also roll. Well, you can't roll. If you hold Control and roll your mouse wheel, you can zoom in and out. So that's a really quick, cool shortcut as well. And let's see here. You can when you create an object, it's also helpful to use Control Shift and then drag the object into place. Let's see here. Not Control Shift. It must be just Control. You can see the variances there. It's got kind of a static snap that it's snapping to for this circle, certain levels of ellipse. So that's useful. It might be Shift. No? A little bit the same there. It's not as static as Control. As you can see, it's a little bit more fluid, but that's not it either. There's a way that it must be Control Shift. You see how dramatic the shifts are in the circle. So that's a very useful tool, using Control Shift to expand an object or expand a text area equally and not so fluidly. So if I don't hold anything down and I hold this circle feature down, you see it's very fluid, which is nice for certain purposes, but when you're trying to be precise and even, it's really helpful to be able to make that circle perfectly. And so you can use Control Shift and sometimes Alt to affect the way that you're creating different objects inside of Inkscape. And so that's pretty much it. That concludes the overview. Make sure to check out some of the specific tutorials on other topics. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later. Bye-bye.